She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She didn't even cry. Maya Santos just stood there, in the center of Harrington Academy's grand ballroom, while 400 of Boston's wealthiest families watched in silence. Chandeliers blazed overhead. The air smelled like champagne and expensive perfume. And in the middle of all that glittering wealth, a 17-year-old girl in a second-hand blazer stood completely exposed, alone in the kind of quiet that only happens when an entire room decides not to speak. Cassandra Whitmore stepped forward, holding something up for the crowd to see. Her voice didn't shake. It never did. Security found this in her locker. She smiled at Maya the way a cat smiles at something it has already decided to destroy. A pearl bracelet, from the silent auction table, worth more than her entire scholarship. Phone cameras rose. Faculty exchanged nervous glances. The school's headmaster, a man who had accepted the Whitmore family's checks for 11 consecutive years, took one small step backward instead of forward. Maya didn't move. She could feel the marble floor cold through the thin soles of her shoes. She could feel every eye in that room pressing against her skin. But she had learned something 5 years ago, in a hospital room in Manila, beside a woman who faced the worst moment of her life without flinching, that dignity is not something people give you. It is something you choose to keep, even when everything around you is being taken away. Then the ballroom doors opened. Nobody had called for anyone. But a man in a dark suit walked in, silver-haired, composed, moving through the crowd like someone who already owned every inch of it. The headmaster's face went white. Cassandra's smile flickered. The man walked directly to Maya. And in a voice that killed every whisper in that room, he said 5 words. "That is my daughter." Who was he? Why had he never once appeared in Maya's life before this night? And what was hidden beneath 11 years of silence that was about to destroy everything the Whitmore family had built? To understand that, you have to go back to a hospital in Manila. June 14th, 2018. The night Maya lost her mother. And the night a secret was sealed inside an envelope that would take 5 years, and one act of unforgivable cruelty, to finally force open. If you believe kindness always finds its way back, subscribe right now and type MAY in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from. This story is just getting started. The last thing Elena Santos ever gave her daughter was a sealed envelope. It was June 14th, 2018. Room 114 of Manila General Hospital smelled like antiseptic and dying flowers. Elena had been a public school teacher in Cebu. Brilliant, patient, the kind of woman who stayed after class for every student who needed more time. But the cancer didn't care about any of that. It had taken 8 months to take everything else. Tonight, it was taking her. Maya was 12 years old. She sat beside the bed holding her mother's hand, not speaking, because there are moments in life when words are simply the wrong instrument. Elena pressed the envelope into Maya's palm. It was already sealed. An address was written on the front in her careful teacher's handwriting, Richard Santos. Boston, Massachusetts. A name Maya had never heard. A city she had never seen. "Mahal kita," Elena whispered. "You are not poor, my love. You are just not finished yet." She closed her eyes. She didn't open them again. Maya did not open the envelope. She placed it at the bottom of her worn canvas backpack, beneath her mother's rosary and a folded photograph, and she carried it like a wound she wasn't ready to examine. Through the relatives who promised to care for her and didn't. Through 2 years of quiet survival with her grandmother in Cebu. Through every morning she woke up and chose to keep going anyway. Then came the scholarship letter. September 2022. Harrington Academy, Boston. A $47,000 full-ride award under a program called the Elena Santos Memorial Scholarship. Maya read the name 3 times. She told herself it was a coincidence. She took the bus to the airport with 1 suitcase and didn't look back. Harrington was a different world. Marble floors. Bronze donor plaques on every wall. The Whitmore Science Wing. The Whitmore Library. The Whitmore Athletic Center. The name was everywhere, engraved, gilded, permanent, the way money writes its own history. Cassandra Whitmore noticed Maya on the very first morning. The worn backpack. The blazer tailored by hand. The shoes polished to hide how old they were. "Another charity case," Cassandra said to her friend, just loud enough. "They keep lowering the bar." Maya heard it. She walked to class. She had survived worse than this. What she didn't know, what nobody at Harrington knew, was that the name on her scholarship was not a coincidence. And the man attached to that name had been inside this building for years. Harrington Academy had a way of making you feel your poverty without ever saying the word out loud. It was in the way the cafeteria went quiet when Maya sat down alone. In the way Professor Hart's approval of her answers was always followed by Cassandra's eye roll, slow, deliberate, performed for the room. In the way certain teachers looked past her when she raised her hand, then called on someone else, someone whose last name appeared on a building. Maya noticed all of it. She filed it away quietly and kept working. October. Cassandra knocked Maya's lunch tray as she passed. The entire table laughed. A teacher glanced over from across the room, saw who was standing there, and looked back at his phone. Maya picked her food up from the floor without a word. One student, James Reyes, a Filipino-American junior sitting 2 tables away, watched the whole thing. He didn't laugh, but he didn't speak either. He looked down at his own tray, and that silence cost him something he wouldn't forget. November. Maya answered a question in economics, so precisely that Professor Hart stopped mid-sentence and asked her to repeat it. Cassandra leaned toward Brooke and whispered loud enough for the third row to hear. Of course she knows it. What else does she have? The class rippled with quiet laughter. Under the desk, Maya's hand pressed flat against her notebook until her knuckles went pale. She kept her face completely still. She had learned that showing pain to people like Cassandra was the same as handing them a weapon. December brought something worse. Maya had applied to Yale Early Decision, 4.1 GPA, 1560 SAT, a letter of recommendation from her economics professor that used the word exceptional 4 times. She sat across from the school counselor, Mr. Ellis, and placed her transcript on his desk like a quiet argument. He studied it for a long moment, then folded his hands. Yale is extremely competitive, Maya. Have you considered state schools? Something more realistic. She left her application on his desk and walked out without answering. In January, it came back stamped, not forwarded. Applicant does not meet recommendation threshold. Maya called her grandmother in Cebu that night. Her grandmother asked how things were going. Maya said she was fine. She was not fine. Then February arrived, and everything changed direction. The school announced the annual Elena Santos Memorial Prize for Academic Excellence. $5,000. Maya's name was called, and across the auditorium, Cassandra Whitmore pulled out her phone, searched 3 words, and went very still. Whatever she found on that screen, she smiled slowly. And she began to plan. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who mistook your silence for weakness, type "still standing" in the comments right now. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Cassandra didn't act alone. That was the part nobody saw coming. The morning after the prize announcement, she sat across from her father in his downtown Boston office. 42nd floor, floor-to-ceiling glass, the kind of room designed to make you feel untouchable. Gerald Whitmore was not a man who raised his voice. He didn't need to. He had learned long ago that real power never announces itself. Cassandra slid her phone across the desk. On the screen was a Boston Business Registry entry. The Harrington Academy Foundation, established 2010, anonymous benefactor. Beside it, a scanned article from the 2010 Boston Globe. Mystery donor funds elite private academy in memory of Filipino educator. Gerald read it twice. Then he set the phone down with the careful precision of someone who understood exactly how dangerous a piece of paper could be. The Whitmore name is on every wall in that school, Cassandra said. If this foundation's donor ever goes public, if anyone finds out we don't actually own it, we lose everything, Gerald finished quietly. He leaned back. Then make sure the girl never connects the dots. Not before we control the situation. The plan was precise and without mercy. Cassandra recruited Brooke and 2 others. During the Spring Gala's silent auction setup, one item would be slipped from the display table into Maya's locker. A pearl bracelet valued at $3,800, donated by the Harrington Foundation itself, though neither Cassandra nor Gerald noticed that detail. Security would be alerted publicly. In front of everyone. Scholarship theft. Expulsion before morning. Clean and permanent. What they didn't account for was James Reyes. James worked 6 hours a week in the school's administrative records office, sorting files, archiving documents, the kind of invisible work that nobody notices until it matters. In early March, reorganizing the foundation files, he found something he wasn't supposed to find. The Elena Santos Memorial Scholarship and the Elena Santos Memorial Prize had both been funded through a single $2.3 million endowment, deposited 1 week after Elena Santos died in Manila. June 21, 2018. James sat with that document for a long time. He thought about the cafeteria. October. Maya picking her lunch up from the floor while he looked away. He called his father that night, his father, who had grown up in the same province as Elena Santos, who had attended her funeral, who knew a name James was only now beginning to understand. His father went quiet for a long moment. Then said, "James, you need to tell her. Before the gala." But Maya was not easy to reach that week. On March 28th, 11 days before the gala, she received a call from Cebu. Her grandmother had fallen. Medical bills, $2,400. Maya had $340 in her account. She sat on the dorm room floor with her back against the bed frame, and for the first time in 5 years she cried. Not because of Cassandra. Not because of Yale. Because she was 17 years old and completely alone, and she could not figure out how to hold everything together at once. She reached into her backpack, pulled out the sealed envelope, ran her finger along the edge. Then she stopped, placed it back. "Not until I earn it, Mama." The next morning James found her in the hallway outside the records office. He was holding a printed document. His hands weren't steady. "Maya." He paused. "The person who built this school. The name on your scholarship. The name on your prize." Another pause. "I think it's your father." Maya's backpack slipped from her shoulder. The sealed envelope fell to the floor between them. Neither of them moved. "Now you know everything those 400 people in that ballroom didn't. You know about the envelope. You know about James. You know what Cassandra planned and what her father authorized in a glass office 42 floors above the street. You know that the bracelet in Maya's locker was put there by human hands with deliberate intention. And now, standing back inside that ballroom, chandeliers blazing, phone cameras raised, the headmaster frozen in place, you understand exactly what Maya Santos was facing when she chose not to run. Cassandra's performance was flawless. Security guard. Bracelet held high. The practiced expression of someone doing the school a favor. Around the room, parents murmured. Teachers looked at the floor. The crowd did what crowds always do when power performs. It watched and said nothing. Headmaster Caldwell stepped forward, his face tight, his voice already forming the words that would end Maya's scholarship before midnight. Then Maya reached into her blazer pocket. She placed the sealed envelope on the table in front of him. Still sealed. 5 years untouched. She looked at him steadily and said, quietly enough that only the people nearest her could hear, "Before you do anything, you should know whose name is on that scholarship." Nobody understood what she meant. Not yet. Then the ballroom doors opened. Richard Santos had not set foot inside Harrington Academy in 11 years. He had built it, funded it, endowed every scholarship and prize within it. And he had done all of it anonymously, from a distance, carrying a guilt so heavy that proximity to the thing he had created felt like more than he deserved. But James Reyes had made one phone call that afternoon. And Richard Santos had gotten in his car. He walked through 400 people without looking at a single one of them. His eyes found Maya immediately. The way you find something you have been looking for across a very long time without admitting it. He stopped 3 feet in front of her. He looked at the sealed envelope on the table. His jaw tightened once. Then he looked at the headmaster. At Cassandra. At Gerald Whitmore standing motionless near the back wall. The color completely gone from his face. And he said it. "That is my daughter." The room didn't just go quiet. It stopped, as though the air itself needed a moment to absorb what had just been said. Cassandra's mouth opened. No sound came out. Gerald Whitmore put one hand on the back of a chair, steadying himself. And in that single gesture, the Whitmore family's 11 years of borrowed authority collapsed without a single wall coming down. Subscribe and hit the bell right now. Because what happens to Cassandra, what happens to every Whitmore name on every wall, and what was inside that sealed envelope? The Whitmore name came down on a Tuesday. 3 workers arrived with scaffolding at 7 a.m. while students were still eating breakfast. By lunch, the Whitmore Science Wing was just the Science Wing. By afternoon, the library had no name at all. Gerald Whitmore did not come to watch. Cassandra was already gone, transferred to a private school in Connecticut before the school board meeting had even ended. The board meeting itself lasted 40 minutes. Richard Santos placed the Harrington Foundation Charter on the table, Article 7, Paragraph 3, and read it without raising his voice. Any donor whose family member engages in documented academic misconduct forfeits all naming rights, permanently and without appeal. Gerald Whitmore's attorney opened his mouth once. then closed it. The school counselor, Mr. Ellis, received a letter the following week informing him that his contract would not be renewed. Yale University, meanwhile, had contacted Harrington directly. A foundation donor had flagged an irregularity in a student application. Maya's file was hand-delivered to the admissions office in New Haven by courier. On April 29th, a thick envelope arrived at her dorm room door. She stood in the hallway and held it for a long moment before opening it. She called her grandmother in Cebu that night. For the first time in a very long time, she had nothing to hide. Richard and Maya did not become family overnight. It wasn't that kind of story. Their first dinner was mostly silence. A small Filipino restaurant in Cambridge, a shared plate of adobo because Richard remembered Elena had loved it. Two people sitting across from each other, carrying the same loss from completely different directions. Maya finally asked the only question that mattered. Why did you leave? Richard didn't offer an excuse. He offered the truth. It took 20 minutes. When he finished, Maya reached into her bag and placed the sealed envelope on the table between them. She wrote this for you, Maya said quietly. I think you've waited long enough. Maya Santos stood at the graduation podium on June 8, 2023, and looked out at 340 people who had watched her be humiliated in that same building 8 weeks earlier. The walls behind her were still bare where the Whitmore plaques had been removed. Nobody had decided what to put there yet. Maya thought that was exactly right. Some spaces need to breathe before they're filled with something worthy. She unfolded a single piece of paper. Her mother's handwriting. One paragraph, the only part of the letter she chose to read aloud. My love, if you find her, don't explain. Don't justify. Don't ask forgiveness with words. Just stay. That is all she will ever need. That is all I ever needed. She folded it carefully. Looked up. My mother was a public school teacher in Cebu. Her name is not on a single building. But she understood something about permanence that no amount of money ever could. That the most lasting thing you can leave in this world is the shape of a person who learned to stand up because you once chose to stand beside them. In the third row, Richard Santos looked down at his hands. His shoulders moved once. After the ceremony, Maya walked to her new office. A small brass nameplate on the door read, Maya Santos. Foundation Director, Elena Santos Memorial Scholarship Program. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she smiled. Not because everything had been fixed, but because her mother's name was finally exactly where it belonged. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe for more stories that refuse to let kindness lose. We'll see you in the next one.